right, just preparing the stream right now.
Oh,
It's doing what the internet does. It's thinking. Didn't say that it's going. Hold on. Oh, we're live streaming. Says stop live streaming. We are live, gentlemen. Welcome back, everybody, to the Trestle Board Talks. Today we have a pretty exciting guest, but I'll turn it over to Trey, and we'll go from there. Trey or Justin, which one you guys want to go ahead and take it from here, and then we'll get started.
Justin, you got it.
Oh, he's muted. That's fine. So today we got an exciting guest, Michael Bell, Brother Bell. Brother Bell, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself and give your bio, and then we'll go ahead and kick off the conversation from there.
All right, thank you, brothers. First and foremost, I'd like to say thank you for inviting me onto this platform. I watched the pilot episode and then the preceding episode, the one that followed, and the first thing I said was it's just the frank nature of the conversation was appealing, and I think that's what we need in masonry. However, my name is Michael Bell. I am a Prince Hall Mason. I've been a Mason almost 11 years now, and I am currently the duly elected worshipful master of my lodge, and I love masonry. I think that's about the briefest and best bio I can give.
Awesome.
All right, man.
Yeah. Do we want to start with the disclaimer before we get going?
Oh, yes, I do.
Please.
Thank you.
Yeah, I got it.
Both disclaimers. Yes.
Yeah.
Sir.
Thank
Yeah.
you. So what I would like to say is, just as we proceed, none of what I'm going to share or what's going to be shared on this podcast is a reflection or representation of the jurisdiction to which my lodge belongs to, as a part of, or any of the brothers on this podcast, as well as my individual lodge, which is why I didn't. What I would like to say is, just as we proceed, there's a feedback.
No, you're good.
Okay, so yeah, I just wanted to put that disclaimer out there that what we're sharing, this is my individual view and understanding of masonry. It's not a part of any Masonic education or school of instruction.
Gotcha.
Yeah. I think that goes for all of us, that the views represented on the Trestle Board Talks are not representative of any Grand Lodge jurisdiction or Masonic education or Masonic organization. It's strictly our own. Go ahead, Trey.
Yep. So I'm Trey. Again, a pleasure to be here one more time as we get into this. Looking forward to having this conversation and to preface what we're about to discuss for those who don't know, is we're going to talk about esoteric masonry in particular, and a little bit of the history of esoteric masonry as it relates to our craft, the craft of masonry. And then we're also going to talk about a couple books and that particularly talk about esoteric masonry. Matter of fact, we're going to talk about Brother Bell's book, The Cult Meaning of Masonry and Its Symbol, and the Chakra Systems, which is going to be really, really good. Plan on having a candid conversation. You know, I've already told my brother Bell, that, hey, I'm gonna ask some hard questions and some questions that I think some of the brothers out there are thinking. We're just not going to shy away from it, because we know that when we talk about esoteric masonry, when the word esoteric is brought up, or occult, right, there's a natural negative connotation that comes along with that. And we want to, one, have a conversation about it, but two, explore the different approaches that we may have here on this forum here to what we believe esoteric masonry is. And then we're going to talk about if we think that it's something that our brothers today in the craft if it's still relevant, number one, and then two, how might we be able to practice or recognize this esoteric masonry within the confines of our lodges and in our daily lives? So really looking forward to this episode. And with that, does anyone have anything to add before we go ahead and I'm going to fire off with the first question?
And let's get started, man. I'm
I think we're
excited.
good.
Let's get started. Bell's ready. I'm ready. Let's go.
Okay. All right. So, Brother Bell, what is esoteric? What is the meaning of esoteric?
Okay, so in the most simplest terms, especially in terms of like etymology or connotative or denotative usage or meaning, esoteric means the inner meaning or inner circle. Exoteric being the opposite would be the outside or the common or plain meaning or understanding. So for myself, when applied to masonry, esoteric would mean the deeper meaning to you. How what the because we can all I like to say a lot that masonry is such that it meets everybody on their level.
Yeah.
We can all leave a meeting feeling good and have different points about why I felt like it was a good meeting. Some people could have been enthralled by the budget, how we balanced that budget and argued over those pennies, right? That could be a great meeting to some.
Yeah.
But for others who require a deeper meaning, and by me saying that masonry is like water, it finds each of us at our own level. So some of us, I know myself, upon being initiated, passed, and raised, it was just seemed like something was tugging at me because it was so beautiful, so deep and meaningful. I just felt like there was more than what I saw on the surface. And so for me, that required esoteric study. It required me to go deeper to try to find out some of these deeper meanings. And something that a lot of people fail to realize, and hopefully I'll be able to say this over and over throughout this talk, is that esoteric is like symbols. Masonry is a beautiful system of morality veiled in allegory illustrated by symbols. The thing about symbols is that symbols have a common usage or meaning, and then it has a personal one. So there's the general meaning of a symbol, and then there's the personal meaning. So for you, the color blue I'm going to use that as a blanket symbol. The color blue as a symbol symbolizes friendship, brotherhood, things of that nature. But for me, the color blue could remind me of my grandmother's living room.
Yeah.
And so that, to me, that's the difference in esoteric and exoteric. The exoteric could be the common understanding. The esoteric is the more inner or deeper meaning, mostly for yourself, but you will find others who will meet you on that level.
That's fair. I know, and I know all the brothers are going to get their opportunity to say something. I agree to a point. I think that all masonry is esoteric, right? Because when we're talking about esoteric, it's the study. It requires specialized knowledge or skills to understand a particular subject, right? So if to the uninitiated, right, the ones who don't know, this thing will seem foreign to them, right? But once you are behind the veil, for lack of better terms, then we like to say that things become, you become exposed to particular things through conversation with other brothers who are well informed, but also through your own lived experience in masonry. But I think it's important to note that, in my opinion, all masonry is esoteric, and I think that from a I guess a philosophical perspective, you can apply the esoteric label to anything. I think that there's biblical esoterics or esoterics related to the Bible as well, because it takes a specialized skill to understand and study. Well, it says study to show thyself approved, but study to understand what it is that is trying to be portrayed to you, whether it be through signs, symbols, or through allegories, symbolism, or parables, for lack of a better term. So I'm curious to see what the rest of the brothers think about just what esoteric means to them.
I'm gonna yield to Justin. I know he has some really thought-provoking questions.
Yeah, I mean, Masonry means a lot of different things to a lot of different Masons. I'm very interested really in the history of how this esoteric knowledge was kind of injected into Freemasonry, because there's a lot of evidence of symbolism from the Egyptians, the Greeks, from that area of the world that predate Freemasonry by thousands of years. For Brother Bell, I'm just interested to kind of hear a little bit about that. Like, you read 10 different books and you get 10 different opinions on how this was passed down. But, do you believe that Freemasonry was this vessel to kind of transport this knowledge into modern day, and is there another organization that kind of participates in this as well?
Oh, yeah, I absolutely do. I sincerely, Kyle, I'll go back and I answer your questions like you asked two
Yeah,
questions
I did.
specifically, and I answer them in order. So, number one, from my research, the beginning of Masonry as we know it, it was a mixture or a combination between the Rosicrucianism and the Lutheran Church, and so from both we got the ritual and the ceremony, because between the two, one has more ritual as opposed to ceremony and vice versa. So do I believe that it is designed to be like a capsule? Yes. My personal opinion is that Masonry is a repository of symbols. And I think that for me, it lends uh, credit to the saying that how Masonry being the most ancient fraternity, right? So we know that once man began to assign symbolic meaning to whether it was images, numbers, letters, or or symbols, so as soon as we began to ascribe these different meanings, like I'll say to any master mason, once you do your studies and your research, when you find out the depth of meaning behind the hammer and the gavel, and you'll see that this does not go back to 1700 England. This goes back to tribal nature. This is something embedded in humanity. So it's very ancient. So I do believe that Masonry as a craft was designed to convey these symbols. And while it is ancient, it tends to take on a particular meaning for the period in which it exists. So on those 2 points in particular.
Yeah, that's great stuff. Just for a newer Mason, why should he start the study of this? Like, what is the value for the modern day Mason?
To be truthful with you, I think that the esoteric nature is what I'm seeing more of the modern Masons are craving. They're coming in and I was talking to somebody recently, they were telling me that Masonry is in a decline. I'm in a total disagreement. You go online any given day, you see people talking about Masonry, even though it's what they don't know. But for it to be a topic of discussion, that's telling me that Masonry is something that a lot of people are curious about. And I actually think that that's part of the reason why a lot of people join the lodge and we never see them again. They actually thought that they were going to get a lot more, and I don't mean like, jokingly, like Illuminati type secrets,
Right.
but you join because something in you prompted you to ask that question. You're looking for something deeper out of life. And so what I tend to, because I've had some younger brothers join our lodge this year, and so I try to tell them first and foremost is that, because everybody want to ask about the all-seeing eye on the pyramid, and they got all these questions, which I understand because I was there also. The thing about Masonry is that it doesn't work unless you do. So if you join so somebody can feed you answers, you're not going to get answers. You will have to find your own light. You're going to have to do the research, and it starts with the ritual. So
Brother Bell.
I think that once for today in particular, people are so concerned because we're in the age of information. We're clearly, with the internet and the collection of big data, we're in the age where people want to know. And the thing about it is, and again, this is my personal opinion, this information age that we're in, It's actually on the cusp of the age of Aquarius. I am one of those people. I don't bang. I don't bang the drum. I don't decide my life based on zodiac signs.
Okay.
I don't base my life based on zodiac signs, but I do believe that we do exist in cycles within cycles. And for me, that's what the zodiac and these ages represent. So I'll just complete my thought. As we leave the age of Pisces, Pisces is denoted by two fish. A lot of people look at Pisces, they see the two fish. We, for the most part, especially in the West, we associate those fish with the fisher of men, which is Jesus. And so Pisces can be summed up as the age of belief. Belief is huge over the last 2000 and something years. Belief played a huge part. You had to be a believer. So as you transition into the age of Aquarius, which just so happens to coincide with our current information age, which is the internet, people want to know. Aquarius is the age of the knower. So the only difference is now people have to discover truths for themselves. It's not a matter of faith or belief. It's about digging in, discovering the truth for yourself, and then making a decision. Now, like you said, you can read 10 books and get 10 different understandings. And so the common denominator in those 10 books are you.
Right.
So for me, a good book is, if I read a good book, I disagree with probably about 90% of it. But that's a good book, because most books don't provoke you to feel left or right. You just read it and say, okay, you move on to the next. So a good book where you say, nah, I don't agree with that. Well, I guess so. Well, let me look up this. That's a thought-provoking book. So I think that right now, Masonry and the esoteric nature, and Brother Trey, I agree with you that Masonry itself is esoteric. I'll just put out like a mini disclaimer that there's concentric rings of esotericism, because some people are, I have brothers right now tell me, worse, we don't need the esoteric. We don't need that, you know? And like you said, you look at the nature of the lodge and you're swimming in it right now. You know, I try to tell brothers, you're in the thick of it. You know, saying that we don't need it, you're already in it. And so the concentric rings is just that for some people, some require more, some require a whole lot less.
I got two remarks.
Just real quick. So let me jump in. So you said something interesting. You said that brother said, "Oh, we don't need the esoteric stuff." So do you believe that because you fear what you don't know, right? That's a fact. And so let's just be honest that we know brothers personally that maybe deficient in certain educational areas. That's fine. Really good brothers though, and knowledgeable in other areas. Is it just because they fear what they don't know? Do you think that that's an issue?
Oh, I know it is. And mostly because I tell you, one of my fun questions that I love asking people, whenever somebody says something about esoteric, because just the word or the idea tends to set people like on defense.
Right.
You can just start talking about a topic and don't mention the word esoteric and everybody's getting light and it's okay. You mention certain buzzwords and people's defenses go up. Usually those defenses go up and it's never because of something somebody has read, something they were told. So whenever somebody says to me something and they feel offended, I just ask, who told you that? Because you'll never hear somebody say, well, I read it in this book. No, somebody told you. So all I can say is, if you get past that initial reaction, that fear, because these are the habits and traits that have been handed down. These certain fears and biases, because I'll be honest, I've been a Mason almost 11 years. And I have family members that know I'm a Mason. They, no doubts about it. And they're just now asking me like questions that they think are taboo, like, Mike, did you have to sacrifice somebody? And so my very simple question is, I'm your brother. What part of me, nothing has changed about me. What part of your brother you think would do this or that? So a lot of time, and this is actually, I'm paraphrasing the conversation I had with my sister, right? And so when I said it just that plainly, she just laughed and like, you know what, you're right, because in these years that I've been a Mason, what about me has changed? I haven't stopped coming around family. I still crack the same corny jokes. I'm still the same person. So a lot of the misunderstanding and fear has been inherited. because most people haven't even done their own research. Now, I can respect you more if you say, I did my research, this and this and that, and I still feel as though I don't agree with XYZ. And that's a perfectly fine answer, you know? So, but yeah, I definitely think that I think the fear is kind of, I don't want to say ingrained, but I'll definitely say it's inherited. It's been inherited. You know, it's like, I'm gonna digress a bit, but I want to say this real quick. It's like discussing religion. Whenever I realize something, that when you discuss religion, you're really not talking about that specific belief system. You're actually, a lot of people feel as though they're discussing it from the lens of their grandmother, their mother, their father. It's who gave them religion, right? So a lot of times when you disagree or agree on a certain topic, people tend to get kind of offended, but it's not about the information. It's more so like taken as an attack on the person who gave it to them. So I always like to put out nice disclaimers that, you know, when I talk about religion specifically, I tell people I talk about religion like I'm talking about my mom. So if I'm talking to you about my mom and you agree, that's lovely. If I'm talking about my mom to you and you disagree, I'm not going to take it personal because you don't know my mom. You know, I'm sharing my mom with you right now, but that's where a lot of the fear and kind of the attitudes come, because it's not so much the information that's being debated. For a lot of people, it's where they got the information from.
Okay. Yeah, Trey, go ahead. I know you said religion, so I'm gonna back off.
Okay.
Go ahead, Trey.
Now, I mean, so I'm gonna at least take a step back and then try to take it a step forward or even further than what you said. So it's the question I have, or the thing that I often find myself reflecting on is, you know, how do I know these things to be true to any degree, right? Either one, I experience it, two, I can experience it or observe it, right? Or I know someone that I trust who has experienced or observed them for themselves, so forth, so on. So, for example, right, when we were just mentioning the I forgot the year of the fish and you know the concentric circles and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, okay, cool. Who made this up, right? Where did it come from? And why should I believe that to be so if I don't know anything, one, about it, or two, I don't know anything about the person or persons who developed this particular system. And I know we're going to unpack it a little bit more. I think it speaks to, you know, what we're going to unpack with the lecture that you gave is like, I asked the question, well, how did you make that correlation between the two, right? So I have a real problem with the, I guess, believing where information comes from. And I think that a lot of brothers, they look at this information and say, well, why should I believe this just because, one, I read it or you told me? Like, I require a couple levels of, you know, validation before saying something. Okay, cool. I see this. Does that make sense? I hope I'm making sense.
Oh, no. It makes perfect sense. And actually it goes back to this is my core belief, and I kind of touched on earlier. It should never be, I think that what you're told should be removed from the other two proofs that you gave, because observable, what you learn for yourself, those are, you know, you can, to an extent, you can entrust your eyes and ears. To another extent, you trust your own capacity to think and to evaluate information. The beautiful thing about masonry, and I'm gonna say this about life, period, everything has already been said. Everything. There's nothing new under the sun. So for me, it's gonna involve, I can trust me. Every lecture I've given, I always list all the books where I got my information from, and it becomes a case of leading horse to water, but you cannot make them drink. So first, it requires a mind open to wonder and not closed to belief. So there has to be the capacity to accept new information, because you can be presented all the facts and the person can still say, nope, I'm not going for it. However, I'll say, especially for us in United States and Western society, a lot of the things that are discussed esoterically can be found right in the Bible.
Mm.
You know, I was telling a friend of mine, I talk about chakras and auras and zodiacs and things like that, but I read my Bible religiously, you know, for lack of a better term. But I also read the Bhagavad Gita. I also read the Quran. I read these other holy books. And so the thing about it all is, if you're willing to investigate, I would never ask you to take my word. I would rather be a good student that takes great notes, share my notes, and then you can do your own homework and come to your own conclusions. So like things like you said about the age of the fish, Pisces, going into Aquarius and things like that. There are certain schools of thought where Jesus, after being resurrected, he said, if you go to a well, you know, you'll find a man in a well. And I wish I'd have been better prepared for that so I could say that Bible verse, but there are numerous scholars, respected scholars, that says that that was a clear indication of a progression from the age of Pisces into the age of Aquarius. And then from there, you would have to do your own homework, especially if you're not willing to accept someone else's point of view. But the desire for further light has to be there. If it's not, then there's nothing you can really say. And in those what I like to share is another beautiful aspect of masonry is that I like to call it, I talk to Eskimos about ice water. I'm not here to tell someone from a desert society about the beauties of water. If you've never experienced the side of the ocean, I can tell you about it, but I'm not here to convince you that oceans exist. So when I'm in a discussion about masonry, especially in the lodge, it's best to, number one, understand who your audience is. I'm not trying to find any conversions because this is not a religion. For me, the deeper meanings in masonry helps me to appreciate why I love being a mason. Because one of the main things that sparked me on this journey was, after becoming a mason, I wanted to understand why I loved it. I didn't know why. People ask me the first year or two of being a Mason, if you ask me why I love being a Mason, man, why you go to all those meetings, Mike? And I couldn't even put it in words. So for me, it was about discovering exactly why I loved Masonry. So what I would say to someone who says, well, show me, the best thing I can say is, I'm going to give you some nice, solid information to start you on that path. And from there, if you got any more questions, we can always build, brother. Or my other best thing is, if you don't want me to continue to tell you what I think, if you get one good book, you go straight to the bibliography and you read every book that person read to write that book, and that'll take you down your own little rabbit hole. But I just think that one of the things that a lot of people feel like masonry conflicts with in terms of esotericism is that somehow it in some ways conflicts with the Bible, which is not true. And that in some way it's like made up or it's man-made. And so you say, well, how can I trust a book that I read? Everything we know has been written by somebody that we don't know, for the most part. You know, the books of the Bible have been written centuries, millennia before any of us were even born. So at some point, if you don't trust the source, then you have to trust yourself. And so if you taste pumpkin pie for the first time and don't like it, I would suggest you try it one more time. But if not, trust me, brother, it's not for you. You know, you don't have to eat any more pumpkin pie.
That's fair. I do have one thing about what you just said there. So to me, that there's some parts of this esoteric, and sorry guys, I got to ask this or say this. There's some part of this esoteric that is seeking knowledge or power from a source that's other than God, right? Because when man is trying to understand and encapsulate, you know, the divine will, he is seeking sources, he's seeking knowledge that resides outside of God. And that is by definition divination, right? Which the Bible does speak about that in Deuteronomy 18, 10, and 12, and other various verses as well. So I think that although knowledge is not seeking knowledge or seeking wisdom is not a sin, it's when we are seeking that outside of God himself. I think that's where some Masons who are of Christian faith have a strong opposition to that, if that makes sense.
You know what I like to say on that same topic, and I'll be very brief. I've had, because like I said, times are changing. Before I became a Mason, I had different I meditated, and I grew up a Jehovah's Witness. So I need everybody on this call listen to understand that growing up a Jehovah's Witness, 7 days a week, you were immersed in the Bible.
Yeah.
You know, and so when I developed like a meditation practice, I would meditate. I had a lot of family members say, you are not supposed to be alone with your own, not supposed to go up in there. Not supposed to do that. You know, and that's along the lines of meditation somehow is somehow in opposition to God. So I'll say that even though divination is listed in the Bible, certain acts of knowing are not in opposition to God, because God is God. I mean, and I'm not saying that this is your personal feeling, your personal thoughts. I just wanted to say that God is all. He is in everything. He is God is all. That this is an all-pervading substance. Even in the Bible, we're told to be Christ-like. Christ said, God and I are one. So you're telling me I can emulate Christ, but I'm not to be of like mind. Now, when I say of like mind of God, I know for a fact, and I'm going to quote one of my favorite Bible verses, Isaiah 55:10, for your thoughts are not my thoughts, nor are my ways your ways. I accept that the concept of deity is far larger than I can fit into my brain and that I can encapsulate through thought. However, I do believe that in striving to know God, that is how we come better to know ourselves. So I've heard the same. Like I said, I had family members that told me you're not supposed to meditate, and the best thing, the best piece of I guess what's the word I'm looking for? Something that validated for me the act of meditation was the first time I heard wisdom dwells in contemplation, right? And so for me, I know that this is the best I can do to tap into the source. I have no delusions, and I would hope that anyone else does not have any delusions that you're going to supersede a supreme intelligence. You know, the best you can hope to is to reach your personal highest vibration, and in the end, all you're doing is learning about self.
Yeah, well, here's an interjection point. Right, you said two things. One, you said your family disagreed with meditation, but Psalms 1 tells us to meditate on His word day and night.
Yes, sir.
I mean,
Yes,
and
sir.
that's written. That is not something I made up. And to expound on that, Isaiah says, as far as the east is from the west, so your thoughts are my thoughts. So we
There you
will
go.
never be able to have that mind of Jehovah Jireh or Yahweh Shai, aka Jesus Christ. We'll never be able to have that mindset because Romans 8 and 23 tell us we're not even perfect. There's no one perfect, not even one. So again, there's all these clues that are there biblically to tell us that we still have work to do.
Yeah.
We're a work in progress. Bible tells us to be reborn. So again, we have to think about, and it's the renewing of our mind. Because it asks, hey, can we go back into the womb a second time? No, we cannot go back into the womb a second time. So we were just renewing our minds. And I think masonry helps us to continue to renew our mind and to look at things differently, because we said a lot earlier about symbols. Well, for the audience, the definition of symbols is sensible uses of images to express hidden meanings. That's what masonry is. So that's just my interjection point. I just had to lend that.
No, that's
That's good.
great. And, for in my experience, receiving the 3 degrees of masonry was really that primer that I needed to pursue more. Right. And I think, Brother Bill, was that kind of your experience too? And a follow-up question to that is, how can what are the elements to really set that stage for more knowledge after that 3rd degree, if that makes sense?
Oh, perfect. You know what? Great. So what I want to share is after being raised, one of the first things I noticed, the nature of my dreams changed. Now, I've always been, I know, and this is something that, and I got to say this, I actually conducted dream studies prior to becoming a Mason. I would do dream studies amongst family and friends because actually I've always been a reader. So I read a book that said somewhere around teenage years, most of us kind of abandon giving dreams any thought. So as people progress from teenage years into the early 20s, at some point people start saying, well, I don't dream anymore. And I was never one of those people. So prior to becoming a Mason, I used to always do little dream studies because I was always amazed that when people would tell me about dreams, and I turned it into an actual like study where I would be around at work, any different places. These are my random coffee table conversations. So I always would kind of like paid attention to my dreams. I would wake up in the morning and I would kind of think for a little bit like, that was kind of a crazy dream, when I was flying. So the first thing I noticed was there was a change in my dreams. My dreams became a lot more symbolic. And so by that, I would say before I have the dream where let's say like you're at work and you're just doing like regular stuff, but you look up and there's no roof, there's no ceiling, the sky's purple, but you're inside a building. I would have dreams like that. Well, my dreams kind of changed. They became kind of forced me to start getting books on symbols and stuff because I can tell you, I still remember I had one dream in particular, and it was just like a bright yellow banana on a rocky ocean, and there was lightning and thunder, and I that was the first time where I said, man, I never had a dream where I didn't immediately like kind of understand it. And so me being me, I'm going to lead it to your second question, because again, I can accept that that's going to be different for everybody else. However, when you become a Mason and you get introduced to these symbols, the best thing to do is to get books on symbols. And then first you learn the general meaning of a symbol, and then you kind of drift towards your personal understanding of the meaning of the symbol. And so at the beginning, I made a statement where I said, Masonry doesn't work unless you do. So this is part of the work. So I'm going to drift off on your second part because I think it leads to something very important. So for those newer brothers that join and you're full of fire and zeal and you want to talk about the deeper meanings of Masonry, no one's going to listen to you until you're ritualistically proficient. And the reason why that is, it's not because you have to pass some test or whatever, as the ritual works on you as you study. So you at some point you're going to start off trying to memorize, but at other times you're going to realize that while you're studying, your head's going to turn to the side and you're going to have an aha moment. And that aha moment is going to make you look at something else and you're going to dig a little deeper there. And so for me, those aha moments help me when I am in lodge and I have to remember ritual. Literally just Friday we had lodge, and one of my stewards asked me, he was setting out regalia, and he said, he held up an apron. Whose is this? He was going to the treasurer's desk with the secretary's apron. And I said, always remember, treasurer is the keeper of the keys. Treasurer has the keys to the kingdom. So all you got to remember. So if you can't decide whether this is secretary or treasurer, and so he still got it wrong. Long story short, which is funny. so later after lodge, he said, man, you set me up, man. I put the wrong regalia down. So, and I gave him, again, didn't make sense to him, but I said, whenever I see the treasurer, I think of the Roman god Janus, which has the double heads. And I know Janus is where we get the word janitor from. Janitor has the keys. So for me, that's treasurer. I know that's convoluted, but this is how my mind works. And so I explained to him, and I'm going to transition from this to the lecture I gave you guys, unless you want to go somewhere else. So I took him from there and I said, so if you want to remember who the secretary is, secretary has two writing emblems. I said, so the Egyptian god over writing was the Egyptian god Tahuti. His symbol was an iblis. It was a bird with a quill type beak. So that sharp beak is the quill, the hard part of the quill feather. And so from there, I told him, and the reason why the secretary's has the two cross pins is because the hard part at the bottom that he writes with, that symbolizes when the secretary has to be hard or harsh, like maybe you haven't paid your dues and the secretary has to send you that harsh letter saying, hey, Get your dues in and we dropping you from the rolls. But I said that feathered part, that's the soft aspect of the secretary when in terms of communicating to a family about bereavement, you know? And so each of these symbols at each station, they hold so many multiple meanings that I'm going to give you my convoluted meaning. I'm going to tell you how I understand it, which is several different layers of correspondence, because to me, that's what symbols and masonry represent, is a correspondence. So if you don't mind, I don't have my lecture with me, but I remember it. So I'm just going to talk about the lecture I gave in the lodge, which is, it was the biological and psychological illusions of the officers of the lodge. So it's a mouthful. And trust me, I've written a couple books, or several books, but I find that the more you write, the longer your titles of your book get. So you have to try to find ways, because you're actually attempting to condense so much information. So that's why, as I got older, I started to understand why books have such long titles, because you're condensing so much information. So the lecture that I gave in Lodge about the biological and psychological, because every officer in the Lodge actually represents a physical aspect of ourselves and a psychological aspect, which is why we can go to a lodge meeting and be so enraptured at something we probably heard thousands of times. And I impressed this on some of my younger officers that, excuse me, this is the importance of knowing your work, because what you're actually observing in lodge, and again, this is my opinion, you're observing your own inner workings. So it is important that you get all the words right and that you do the right kind of steps and step off from the left foot XYZ. So just to be brief, and I won't go into too much detail. So the book I wrote, The Occult Meaning of Masonry, Its Symbols, and the Chakra System. A lot of people see that title and they think of something bad, but my motivation when I became a Mason was that I realized it was a system of correspondences, that one thing can lead you to another and then to another, and each of those lead right back to me. So whether I talk about masonry through the lens of chakras, or I could talk about it through the lens of Greek gods, Egyptian gods, or you can talk about masonry actually in terms of color, right? All these things appeal to us mentally, and we actually associate each of these things to biological functions. And so in the lodge, we have these 12 principal officers. We have 12 officers. Just so happen we have 12 zodiac signs. Just so happen. I'm pretty sure the people who sat down and gave a lot of thought to masonry did put it into account. So what we find is that, and this could be done on your own through research, what you'll find is that each zodiac is actually associated with a different part of your body. So lungs, neck, head, arms, each body part is associated as a form of correspondence. And so for me, how I ended up down this windy road, I thought to myself, well, if there's 12 zodiac and there's 12 officers of the lodge, then there has to be a biological correspondence between each officer and a part of your body. And so there are numerous authors out there that give very good information. A lot of it, I attempted to make connections on my own. And trust me, that lecture is the result of almost 10 years of research. And even in that, I would not sit here and say it's all final. There's a great author, C.C. Zane. He was a Mason, I want to say from the 1800s. I got a lot of information from his books. But otherwise, I use Gray's Anatomy. I used several different books on symbols. Of course, I have Mackey's Encyclopedia. I use authentic Masonic sources, and I found very authentic secular authors on symbols. Because another thing I found was that a lot of Masons say, if it didn't come from Mackey, I don't want to hear it. However, the thing about symbols is that symbols are not just the purview of the Masonic order. These symbols are universally accepted. So to say that I'm only going to use Masonic sources for my research is kind of like saying I'm going to run a 100-yard dash against Usain Bolt with my arm tied behind my back inside a gunny sack. So just to be brief again, I'm going to get back on track. So we have several different officers in the lodge. There, throughout the ritual, there are things said throughout our opening and closing, there are things said and demonstrated where you can understand that the three principal officers represent three aspects of yourself, whether it's the diurnal aspects of the sun, the moon, the rising sun, things like that. These are clues for research. And the more you research these aspects, the rising sun is synonymous with thought and insight and divine revelation. The setting sun has a different set of symbols and meanings, and it's associated with different body parts and aspects of yourself, as well as the sun at noon has a totally different meaning as opposed to the setting and rising sun. So from that, I'm kind of editing myself because I'm so used to talking about this in Tao lodges. So I'm trying to edit myself as I talk. So the psychological aspect of each officer is found also in the opening and the closing, because we know that the senior deacon relays orders as opposed to someone else relaying messages.
Yep.
Right. We know from the emblems of each officer, and again, it does take a level of trust or self-knowledge to understand that the junior deacon, who at some point portrays a sea captain, right? And we know that the water sea captain, that can correspond to the sign of Cancer, and water is emotions. So you can say, well, okay, if he's in charge of guarding something, then that person most likely is guarding emotions or represents emotional intelligence. And so the lecture that I gave you guys, I listed my sources at the end. I did my best to methodically walk down and show these correspondences. And so, like I just said just a few moments ago, this is actually the result of years of research. I did not write my first book until I had been a Mason for 6 years. And even then, I just felt like I was ready to give birth. I could have still studied another 10 years and still have not been ready to put a book out. So I just think that there are certain aspects of Masonry, if we're, again, one of my favorite sayings, if your mind is open to wonder and not closed to belief, you will see these correspondences and be open to explore further. And I want to say this, because I know you had a question for me, Trey, so I'm gonna jump into it. My book is The Occult Meaning of Masonry, its symbols and the chakra system. So the first question I always get is, why would I use the word occult in connection with Masonry? And this goes back to what I said previously, in that someone told you that the word occult means bad.
No,
Told you that.
no, that's not what it.
Okay, well, my brother, I love that you're disagreeing with me.
Mm-hmm.
The word occult up until 2, maybe 3 centuries ago had none of these connotations.
Yeah.
3 centuries ago. And now in terms of history, 300 years ago was a blink. So 300 years ago, I could have said that was the title of my book. Nobody would have said that's evil. But it's only that now we have this connotation that occult is tied in with sorcery. When if you merely look up the etymology of the word, it just means hidden. Matter of fact, the first 3 words of it, or I'll say the first 3, let's say the first 4 letters, oculus, it's eyes. It's in terms of what you could see. It's so the reason why, and trust me, I debated over putting that word. I could have easily said the esoteric meaning of Masonry, and it would have been a much easier pill to swallow. However, I realized something, that especially as Masons, we understand the power of words, because a wrong word can deny you access to the temple, right? So I use that specifically in terms of the temple, because our ears are situated right next to our temples. So if the wrong word can bar you from the temple, then maybe this isn't for you. So actually, I'm hoping I did somebody a favor and said, maybe this isn't for you, because we should do our due diligence. The word of code has taken on because again, these are not English words. These are Greek words. So what we attach to these words in English comes from things that we've seen in recent history. But go ahead, Brother Trey. I know you got something for me.
No, we're go ahead.
Yeah, so you just brought up this point again. You said these are Greek words, not English words. Well, what language was the Bible originally written in?
I agree.
There,
It
there's
was in
three.
Hebrew. It was in Hebrew.
Originally Hebrew,
Yeah, and then it was
translated into Septuagint Greek.
right. But once it was translated, remember, and as you well know, and I'm not going to assault your intelligence, that Greek and Hebrew is read from right to left. Right. So as you transcribe those words into Greek and English, the literal definition of those words, the etymology, as you said a few times, changes, right or wrong.
Yep, you lose the meaning.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
this the point I just want to
yeah.
add for the audience. Trey, go ahead, man.
No, and that's a great point because I think that a lot of us, a lot of brothers, don't take the time to one, study language and study what it is that we're reading or what it is that we're memorizing from the sense of what does this word mean? Because there's a lot of strange language happening and in a lot of different things within the lodge, right? And if you don't take the time to read, because that was one of the things Justin can attest to this, I had a hard line, right? And I said, there are some things that I will not do. There are things that I will not say because of what I believe, right? And at no point will I, cross that threshold. But you only recognize that if you understand the words and their meanings and what it is trying to tell you, right? But to your point about the occult meaning, I get it. As far as yes, it does have a negative condemnation to it, condemnation to it, as of late. But when I look at it, I look at things from. I always go back to the good old Webster, and then when I'm studying, also I use a lexicon, whether that be the lexicon for Hebrew to English or from Aramaic to English to understand the context, the full context of what it is that I'm trying to absorb or trying to understand. And I think that as Masons or just as individuals, I'll say it as scholars, right? We have to take the time to try to understand what it is the origin of these words or these sayings are to one, bring to light what it actually is trying to tell us, right, in that context, but two, so it can resonate with us on a deeper level. Because you're right, I have in my note here, the definition of occult, right, which is the occult general refers to the hidden secret knowledge, particularly concerning spiritual or supernatural or mystical practices, right, and it even breaks it down even further. And that's where in my studies I'm like, okay, cool. I'm approaching this from this perspective. So when I see the word divination, right, I'm like, well, I've read that somewhere before, so let me go and dive into that, and then from there, unpack the layer from the biblical context again. What does the word divination mean in the Bible, right? And I don't think that a lot of us take that time to really study. And then you said something earlier too that really, I guess got me thinking is like, as I look at this body of work, right, and just this one lecture, right, that you shared with us, and I see the work that went into making the correlation, right. I think that about like it takes a beautiful mind to be able to make those correlations, and it's not something that you stumble upon by happenstance. So I'm curious as to what was your process or your aim going into making this lecture? Like, did it just come to you naturally? Like, this is what it is, or was there something that you were seeking to understand about a particular chair that led you down this road to make this beautiful lecture?
Yes, great question. Thank you. It goes back to after I was raised. Like I said, that lecture actually is a culmination of about 10 years of research. Because once I was raised, I just felt like there has to be more than what was just presented. So I know before we got online, I told a funny story about me and saying the word chakras in lodge. Well, part of the trail that led me to this rabbit hole, uh, chakras. I was into the chakra system. And then you said before we went online, a lot of people aren't into it. If I'm not into, that Hindu system and, that belief, then how can I, even begin to grasp the meaning of chakras? So in my studies about chakras, I realized that chakras are actually a system of correspondences because they are represented by letters, numbers, and symbols, just like the Hebrew language. And so after getting raised, I said to myself, the chakra system has to be represented in the lodge. Now, the thing about, like you said, having this beautiful mind, you can, like going on the internet, you go on Google, you type in a question, you're going to get the answer you were looking for. That might not be the right answer, but if you're leaning towards a certain way, that's how Google finishes the rest of your sentence. It's going to give you what you're looking for. So it does require a certain level of, I don't want to just say empirical research. There's a word, it's called dialectical engagement. So dialectical engagement, if anybody that might not know, it's if you believe something to be so, you accept the total opposite. You research the total opposite of what you feel so passionately about. And then you search along those lines, and you search not half-heartedly, wholeheartedly, to prove your original stance wrong. So what this gives you is a way to be impartial in your thoughts. So in beginning this road to discovery, I would always balance my own thoughts by saying, well, let me look in the opposite direction and not just give a cursory look, but kind of be certain. So for me, I would come to the lodge, and especially in the opening and closing and during different degrees, you would hear certain things said that kind of like, for me, and because mentally, I always think correspondence. I always think that one can lead to another, and it doesn't have to necessarily lead to in a straight line. So for me, I began to notice, especially as I moved around the chairs in the lodge, you start, and that's something I gotta say out loud. The beauty of the chairs is that as you gain these different angles on light, because each time you have a different view of the lodge and you have a different angle towards the east, as you gain these different views, you're learning by osmosis. And so most of us, in the back of our mind, we're going to make different connections. One of my past masters always tell the story that when I was senior deacon, he was in the middle of giving one of the second degree lectures, and my head just tilted to the side and I drifted off. He had to snap me back like, hey, let's keep moving. But a dot connected for me. And so the beauty of masonry is that if you have a particularly beautiful mind, or if you think a certain way, you will begin to see connections. From there, it's just about your resources and finding the necessary books. Like I said, I have actually, brothers, a year and a couple months ago, a year and a few months ago. So July of 23, I suffered a really bad fire. We lost just about everything. And one of the things that hurt me the most, brothers, I had a huge library. I would say no less than 300 books. And so, I mean, masonry, of course, began to take up a huge section of it, but I have books on anatomy. I have books on, I'm not a Hebrew scholar, but I have several books that I can use as reference sources. So what I'm saying is the lecture that I wrote and how I got there, it really just stemmed from one question. And I just keep saying it. Why do I love masonry so much? How can I come to this meeting and I know that something profound happened and I can't even like tangibly put my fingers on it and say, this is what I saw. And so I took that initial very innocent question. I did my research, and so I was looking for, just in terms of how the worshipful master, how he interacts with each officer. So for me, that was a clue to the biological, to the psychological. And so there are things said that that for me gave me clues. And from there, I just went and did my research. So if I needed a book on certain topics, I wouldn't found it. Books on psychology and things like that.
Yeah.
Hey, Brother Bill, let me share with the audience some stuff from the lecture without getting too deep. But just for the audience, just for context, as you're talking about the worship masters and the beauty of the chairs, and from your lecture, um, one of the things you wrote was worst master, senior warden, and junior warden can be likened to the three master glands within the brain: the pineal gland, pituitary gland, and hypothalamus gland, respectively, right? And then as you go into the pineal gland is the third eye, but then as you got deeper into your lecture, you kind of broke the officers down, which I appreciated. You said the worship master represents the conscious mind, and if you think about King Solomon leading, that's what it was, right? And then you think about the senior warden representing the soul, or we say the strength. Then junior warden representing the sun, right? At its highest peak. The senior deacon, as you alluded to, relays orders, whereas the junior deacon relays messages. And then the Tyler being that guard, right? He guards against certain intrusive thoughts and emotions. So just for the context of the audience as they to understand what you're talking about, the beauty of the chairs.
Yeah, and I'll say this. That understanding helped me to appreciate more. It made me when I came to Lodge, that's what I came to see that interaction between my will and my emotional intelligence, to see the interaction between the conscious mind, the soul, and the highest self. So once you assign these meanings, to be honest, that's what made me a regular attending member. So I can come and be sure that what I think I'm seeing is what I'm seeing. Maybe I got to tweak it. And so I would say this too. To our newer brothers, and not just to the new brothers, to the older brothers, you should always come to Lodge with a little bit of homework. You know, I love my Lodge. My past masters, we pride ourselves on being ritualistically proficient. And so a lot of times you come to Lodge, I've had brothers come, especially new brothers. They come in first meeting, and as the opening is about to start, they open up the ritual and they ready to read line for line. Past always say, that away, that's for at home. Here, it's more of an osmosis type thing. Here, watch, observe, let it sink in. And that's why another thing I always say is when you catch a brother and you say, let me hear you do the senior deacons part. Oh, brother, I don't know it. I don't know it. Trust me, you know it. You just don't know that you know it. Let's get started. Let me hear you, just start saying it. And so I love to see that twinkle in somebody's eye when they realize they knew more than they thought they did, because a huge part of masonry is psychological, a huge part of it. I love another one of my famous sayings is that the beauty of masonry is that it's a sacred space where you can learn big and fail small. You'll never step up to do anything in the lodge, have a part, a lecture where everybody don't tell you you did great, good job. Now they might follow up with next time, study a little more, or you could use your hands and talk, and or the ones you can tell this brother didn't study at all, and you might have to come after you tell him good job, because the good job is you showed up and you had the heart to do it, but you need to get in that book a little more, brother. I know you know it, but I just want to say that this is it becomes like I said, we're about to quit this sacred retreat. What makes it so sacred is that you actually have a space where nobody's gonna boo you if you're not right. They're still gonna tell you good job. They're still gonna tell you ways that you can improve and become a better man. And I'll say this too. I know I'm a guest host. I don't want to hog up all the time, but I had a beautiful discussion after Lodge Friday. We have a past master. We go to his house after Lodge meetings, and we have those hard Masonic conversations where somebody might even get a little mad or I disagree, and man, no, whatever. So we were talking, and we were talking about how do you make good men better, right? Now that's our slogan, that's our saying, but it's not in any book. Nowhere does it says, as worshipful master, you are charged with making these men better. No, that's something that we say. So no, it's not in the ritual, none of that. But how do you do it? Well, you put good men in position and allow them to improve on themselves. We talk about rough and smooth ashlers. So somehow during the middle of the discussion, I used I referred it to I was talking about the three principal officers and the Trimurti, the three principal deities in Hinduism, Shiva, Brahma, and Vishnu. And so we were talking, I was trying to show the correspondence to being good men, make good men becoming better. We had started talking about rough ashlar and smooth ashlar. So I was trying to let them understand that at some point the old you has to be destroyed. That's why do you think it said when you and the brother talking and you come up on a good idea? I love it when my past masters say, get your working tools and meet me in the quarry. We don't say when we starting from ground up on a great idea, how come we don't say meet me in the sanctum sanctorum? Now we're not busting no rocks and breaking nothing down up in there. There is where we put on our best version. When you want to build something back up, you take it down to the quarry, to the rubbles, and then you build back up. So we were talking, and one of my brothers said he didn't like it. I used the word destroy. No, man, you can't say destroy. Yeah, you can, because the only clear view is going to be atop a mountain of your former selves. When you smooth off that ashlar, where do you think all those shavings go? You step right on top of them, and now you got a better view. And as you continue to shave and work on that ashlar, smooth it out, perfection is never attained. You just get a better view each time from all that debris. So I kind of got off track too. I went on a nice tangent. I forget why I said that, but this for me, these are the discussions about masonry that go from the tangible into the philosophical. And I personally like to use vivid visual cues so you can kind of see because I realize that a certain aspect of us is geared towards visual cues. Even if you only see it in your mind's eye, which is why I can say the color purple, and it's not around us anywhere, but you can kind of see it in your mind. So for me, hopefully I get back on track, because I was about to go into that conversation we had on Friday. For me, it's always about correspondence. And so just staying on track with the topic of esoteric and masonry, what I found is that, I said it earlier, is that masonry is like water and it meets you on your own level. You can follow these correspondences. You don't have to go into any spooky or deep waters, but you can find different correspondences to help you better appreciate masonry. I spoke on the chakra system. That's where I was at. That's where I should have been. In the Bible, I believe it's in Revelation, we have the 7 churches.
Yep.
There is
of God as well.
There is a lot of solid research. And I don't want to say, I'm not going to recommend any kooks or people that's way out there, but there are a lot of people that have done the research prior to me, not just in the last 100 years. I'm talking about 1700s, respected Masonic scholars that have pointed out that the chakra system can be corresponded to the 7 churches in Revelation. And if you really just give it a little bit of thought, I won't even say common sense, you figure at that time for them to say the 7 churches in Asia, Christianity was just getting off its feet right there in that area. So for that reference, and you can go, I actually have it in the book. I don't want to go too deep into it right now, but it's all there if you're willing to look. Now, I wanted to go another thing you touched on, Brother Trey, and then I'm gonna turn the floor over because I put this conversation in the headlock.
No, that's fine. I want Justin to chime in as well.
Okay.
Before we wrap up.
Yeah, I mean, there's
Trey
not
had
a lot
mentioned,
to say.
you had mentioned Kabbalah, Trey, and how it applies to masonry. That's another aspect that, even though brothers don't realize it, the lodge is structured and functions Kabbalistically. And this actually makes sense because, as Dr. Randall pointed out earlier, the Bible was originally written in Hebrew, then translated into Greek and then other languages. However, Hebrew thought is Kabbalistic. If you look at the construction of the lodge, it lines up so perfectly with Kabbalah, and we're talking just Blue Lodge. You can go to consistory or other independent bodies, and you can see that connection even better. And so that's why I say there's things about masonry that we know without having been explicitly taught or told because of these systems of correspondence. Go ahead, Justin.
No, I was just, I've really enjoyed just listening tonight, to be 100% honest with you. Masonry, you really have to find what interests you and pursue that. And it's very clear that you have pursued what you are interested in. I always tell the story, my brother-in-law, he's a member of our lodge. He He dislikes the meetings. He thinks they're super boring. He does not like the ritual. But he loves the community service. That is what keeps him coming back, right? And you probably won't see him at a business meeting. You probably won't see him anywhere else. You won't catch him dead talking about what we've been talking tonight. But he's gonna be the first one to show up for a community service event, and he's likely gonna be the last guy to leave. That's what he likes. That's what he gets down on. So I just enjoy listening to Masons that are very passionate about whatever it is that they are passionate about. So it's very fascinating to listen, to speak on the subject. And I've certainly learned a ton in the process. So for that, I thank you.
Yeah, let me put a bow on some of the things that Brother Bell was saying. And just from my perspective, my purview as just a teacher of masonry. First of all, we talked about brothers learning the ritual, getting your book, right? I think that's such a misnomer because we tell brothers to learn the ritual or remember the ritual, recite the ritual.
Yeah.
When do we ever tell them how? Because there's different ways to study.
Yeah.
Right? People have different study methods, but as leaders in this organization, because we are leaders, why don't we show brothers how to study? There's a books, plural, written on how to study the Masonic ritual. Why don't we show them how to study? That's my aim, right? Not tell you to study, but show you how to study to give you some tools. We talk about those working tools, don't we? And earlier you said your conversation Friday was how to make good men better men. Show them how to use the working tools.
Right.
And if we're being honest, right, the 6 hour, the 6th day of the week is high noon. That's Jewish, originally Hebrew, right? Because the original Hebrews were Jewish. So there's a lot that we just don't talk about because we don't know. And my wife always says, you don't know what you don't know.
Yep.
Right. So again, why are we not showing brothers how to study? That's number one. And that's most important to me because that's where it gets convoluted. The first book that brothers should get when they become a Mason is a dictionary. Because you said you're reciting the ritual, you have that aha moment, but you have to understand the etymology of the words because words have meaning to have that aha moment. Because if I just remember something, is it really in my hippocampus? No, it's in my short-term memory. It's not in my long-term memory because you said something earlier about the psychology, right? So brothers, subconscious, more or less. Brothers hearing that, do you know the senior deacons part? They've heard it 1,000 times and subconsciously they know it. That's why he said, go ahead and start saying it. And then when they say it, it's just like a song that you haven't heard in 20 years. As soon as you hear the first note of that song, what do? Recite the whole song. Right? Again, that's a form of memory. How did you put that into your long-term memory? So we got some work to do as far as teaching, right? Because we have to get back to teaching, and you're a hell of a teacher. And I've just enjoyed, just like Justin, the time.
Yeah, it's been great.
Yeah.
I want to say to you real quick what you said about teaching brothers how to learn. What I learned, and I try to share it, is I didn't think about the books, and you're right. There are several books on how to study, and I've read some myself. I just don't recommend them as much as I should. But what I learned was that, and this is from another book. I forget the author at the time, but what he said was we learn through our 5 senses.
Right.
We all learn through most of us are a combination. Some of us are tactile. We could touch and see. So if I read and I follow my finger on the page, I form a mental image and I can see the book in my mind. Some people are auditory. Yeah, I equate it to, of course, second degree. And we know that out of those 5 senses, 3 are highly held in esteem. But what about the other 2? Well, the other 2 actually apply in terms of learning. So the 3 that Masons hold in high esteem are seeing, feeling,
and hearing.
and hearing, right? The other 2 being smell and taste. So how you get with those 2 for some, because maybe you're not, those 3 are not how you learn.
Right.
So what you do is you maybe light an incense, your favorite Febreze smell, but only that smell while you're studying.
Yeah.
And the other time, this is your special smell. So if it's a incense, you burn a specific incense, because if that is how you relay information, like I love that you said hippocampus, because I'm so deep into the biological aspect. There are certain ways that we relay information to our long-term memory. And so some of us are auditory and tactile.
Right.
I have to sit down. Some people I have brothers in my lives that say, I have to write it up. I write it out and I might crumple up, throw it away. But if I don't write it out, I won't remember it. And so I think another part of it too is we start off trying to remember and recite and memorize, but what we fail to realize that a story is being told, and we have to, so long as you know the story, because we all know nobody's going to be perfect. You might have some better nights and you might have some not so good nights, but what you're doing, especially in terms of when you're bringing new brothers in, is you're telling them your story, telling them a story. So don't focus so hard on memorization as opposed to knowing the story, because knowing the story can actually help you stay on track with your memory, with what you've memorized. So I love it when I have past masters who tell me, don't tell me that you learned it or that you memorized it. Tell me that you know it. Because if you know it, if you go beyond just committing it to memory, because memory is faulty. Matter of fact, I was just sharing some two brothers in my lodge. The thing about memory and the reason why you shouldn't rely on it is because the more you go back to a memory, the more you consciously change it. That's why an all right day when you were 8, by the time you're 50, it was the greatest day of your life. Because you went back and tampered with that memory so much, the blues were bluer, the smells were more vibrant. So you don't, memory is that's just an aspect of memory. So when I'm told not to memorize it, but to know it, that's why I don't sit up and say, just because I've been in the East 10 months, I don't got to read the opening and closing anymore. No, because you begin to transpose words and you begin to, memory is a funny thing. So I what you said, I'm definitely going to add that. I'm definitely going to begin to recommend books, because everybody learns differently. And what I've come to learn is that it's just always through the 5 senses or some combination of.
Yeah, but remember in June I did that lecture on breaking down an opening and closing charge. We say it all the time, but people don't understand what those words mean, the etymology of those words. They just use rote memorization to get through it.
Yeah.
Right. But we can't make good men better men if we don't, just like you said, know what we're talking about, feel and understand what we're talking about. There's no way that we can make good men better men.
Yeah.
We have to really understand, feel it, love it, right? Live it. And you said it earlier, your why. You have to have a strong why to push forward and to be able to, because if you can teach something, you know it inside out, right or wrong.
Yep.
Yeah. So again, that's kind of my last parting things, man. And I've enjoyed the hell out of you today.
Yeah, this has been great.
Yeah, you and I are gonna have a lot of conversations anyway. Obviously, and I think we're getting to know each other on different levels. And I think earlier in June was the first time we had ever even seen each other, whether that's virtually or we've heard of each other, but never seen each other. So that was pretty dope. So we'll go ahead and wind this down. Any parting thoughts from Justin or Trey?
No, Brother Bell, I appreciate it. Yeah, I really appreciate the wisdom. It's been great, and a lot of things that you say just really resonate with me. Setting the stage for study, like that was huge. I recently moved. I think we said on the last podcast, and I'm having a hard time studying because I'm used to being in a certain section of my garage with the same smell, with the same lighting, and now that I'm in a new environment, I'm really struggling. So that really hit home. So thank you for that. I appreciate it. I really hope we get to do this again. It's been great.
Oh yeah, he'll be back. I know he'll be back on there.
We need a 3-hour episode for him.
Hey, really but that's fine.
We really do.
We don't constrict it to a time. We just we try to keep it at hour and a half. But
it's been awesome.
Definitely.
Yeah, I'll just say for me, first off, Brother Bell, appreciate you coming on and being willing to have the dialogue. And I know I asked some pretty straightforward questions, but I think that this is obviously one of the, what do we call this? This is rhetoric, right? When we're talking about the several liberal arts, And it's important for us, not only as Masons, just to have this dialect and this dialogue to one, challenge each other's thoughts, two, develop that logic, right? From whether it be deductive reasoning or abductive reasoning based off of others' experience and whatnot. So we can put together our own logic and how we want to approach particular topics. I think as this conversation we've alluded to in numerous times is that, there's a certain connotation with esoteric Masonry when we say esoteric and all of these words that we should continue to dispel through having conversations as we've had. I'm really thankful for you coming on here and having this conversation. I'm really excited, and I hope that we can put together, at least 5 of those books. Not to overwhelm the brothers or whoever the listeners are out there, but 5 of these books to put into the description of this YouTube video to kind of just help the brothers along to start their own journey and their own study, and let it be known, like, it's okay not to be involved or not to want to participate in esoteric Masonry, although to a degree you're already involved in it, you just don't know it.
Yeah, exactly.
It's you can play the game,
Yeah.
or you can not play the game and you're still in the game regardless. So I think it's important for us to just continue to educate brothers, and I'm curious on where my mind is going to take me into some of these rabbit holes on different topics and different things. And one thing I'm noticing, and I'll close it here, I know I'm being long-winded, but is that I'm starting to see the beauty in a lot of different things that are just not what I've been exposed to. And I think that that's one of the things that Masonry has done and continues to do for brothers, is expose them to a different thought process, a different logic, to open your mind to really, see this colorful world for what it is, something that you will never be able to fully and truly understand. But the more that you seek to understand it, the more you become present of the design, the beautiful design of this thing called life. So again, appreciate it. Thank you for your time, and looking forward to having you here again, Brother Bell.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Brother Bell, any final thoughts from you, brother? I mean, we actually come on here. You graciously did it. You took time out of your day, which is important, the most valuable thing that you can never give back. So any final thoughts from you? I think we owe that to you.
Oh, again, I'm going to close what I started with. Thank you for having me on this platform. I started to, I love Masonry. And what I would say to anybody listening, if you didn't understand anything that was said, I said several times about having a mind open to wonder and not closed to believe. When you love Masonry, you'll sit up and you'll talk to those brothers in your lodge about whatever they're talking about. You will meet those brothers on their level, and I found that by not having an agenda, when I talk to brothers, whatever that, like you said, if you want to talk about community service, oh, I'm here for it. Yeah, I had some ideas about that. If we did this. And so if another brother wants to talk about the Bible, I'm here for it. Let's talk about it. If whatever it is, and that mind open to wonder is where you kind of adopt that childlike mind. So I thank you for allowing me to drift off and my adult ADD to kick in, and because I love talking about it. And my wife will attest to it. I probably have half a dozen conversations a day, whether it's about financial and not just because I'm in the East, but I love talking about Masonry, the applicable aspects. So thank you. And hopefully some of what I said was applicable to those that are listening. So, but thank you.
Somebody's going to take this episode, right? And they're going to watch it again and again, and they're going to start to reshape their mind. Because that's the goal, right? We want people to, first of all, develop your own mind, not what you heard, what you know.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because you said it earlier, like we hear stuff and we latch onto that like that's the gospel, for better lack of terms, right? But if we read it for ourselves and then we read the reference and we figure something out and we go down those rabbit holes, we start to create stuff for us, for your own self, right? Knowledge of self, right?
Mm-hmm.
First. So I'm excited where this is going to go and who's going to look at it. I always think who's watching and who's listening, but that's a good thing. So appreciate it, man. I'm gonna go ahead and let me go ahead and kill this live stream real quick. So to the audience again, like, share, and subscribe. We will see you definitely next month. And we'll give you notification on our surprise guest. So appreciate everybody.